Welcome to video 2 of the Search for a Better Health series. In this video, we're going to be looking at the importance of cleanliness and 3 practices which we're going to discuss and how they can prevent infectious diseases. So when we talk about disease, we talk about 2 types, infectious and non-infectious. And infectious diseases are those that are caused by an infective agent. And this infective agent or a causative agent is also known as a pathogen. They can include things like measles, chickenpox, AIDS, hepatitis, typhoid, conjunctivitis, just to name a few. And then we can discuss non-infectious, which are diseases that are not caused by pathogens and cannot be passed from one person to another, but they can be inherited. And they can include things such as Down syndrome, cystic fibrosis, scurvy, or anemia. And they may be inherited, nutritional, or environmental diseases. When we talk about a pathogen, it can be defined as any organism or infective agent that lives in or on another living organism and causes a disease. These pathogens need the right conditions to multiply and be transmitted. Depending on the source of that pathogen and where it originated will depend on what those conditions specifically are. When we talk about transmitted, we talk about 3 types. There's direct, where pathogens pass direct from person to person. There's indirect, which where a pathogen is transferred from the environment, so in the form of air, food, or water to another person, or it can be transferred by a vector, and that means that it's transmitted from person to person by being carried by another organism. Environments which are crowded, dirty, or unsanitary encourage the spread of disease. When we talk about cleanliness, we talk about hygiene and practices that are important in reducing the transmission of infectious diseases. And these can be just personal, so things that individuals can do, or things that we can do as part of a society. And that includes things like government legislation and any controls on regulating public health. When we talk about personal hygiene, we're talking about keeping our bodies and any surface of our body clean to reduce the risk of pathogens entering our body or preventing the transmission of these pathogens to others and therefore preventing the cause of diseases. So we want to make sure that we inhibit the buildup of micro-organisms on our bodies. Some practices include hand washing, ensuring it's done with soap and water before eating and then after going to the toilet. Body, hair, and teeth should be regularly washed and cleaned to prevent pathogen buildup. And another is to make sure that if you cough or sneeze, you do that into a handkerchief or a tissue to prevent any airborne droplets passing on that disease. We can also talk about community hygiene, which we're preventing the buildup of pathogenic organisms in communities, thus reducing the spread of disease. That includes having sewage and garbage disposal, including that any equipment used in hospitals, doctor surgeries, dentists, food preparation are all sterilised and disinfected, and ensures that city planning regulates housing developments to reduce overcrowding and therefore reducing the risk of transmission of diseases, but also making sure that there's adequate sewage and water sources for people to have. Next, we talk about food practices. And I guess there's been an increase in foodborne disease due to a change in eating habits. So there's a lot more people eating at fast food restaurants. Bacteria can multiply very quickly in food if the conditions are right. So if there's nutrients for that bacteria to grow, if the temperature is right, and if there's enough moisture. To ensure that our food remains healthy and we don't transmit diseases and pathogens, we make sure that hand washing is done before and during food preparation, ensuring hair is tied back and cuts are covered, ensuring utensils are washed to avoid cross-contamination between foods. Different chopping boards can be used for different foods to avoid cross-contamination. We need to make sure that any food that is stored in a refrigerated environment, that it's stored correctly, that it's reheated and kept in temperatures above 70 degrees, and when we're cooking food, making sure it's cooked thoroughly and making sure that we're not eating any raw foods. Here we have a quick, a temperature gauge of where food is safe to eat and where we should be making sure our food is not sitting. So in that danger zone, we're making sure that there's no food sitting at those temperatures because they're the perfect temperatures for bacteria to grow. When we talk about our water supply, we need to make sure that we maintain our water quality to minimise the risk that any pathogens can grow in that water and therefore be brought into our houses when we're using water, which is why there's strict standards and guidelines to reduce the incidence of disease. Water is usually filtered and chlorinated, and that for us is done through Sydney Water and some of their practices. But there is the potential to use recycled water, but any recycled water is only used for toilet flushing and irrigation, not for people to drink. That concludes video 2. Make sure you tune in for video 3, which will give you an overview of the practical tasks you'll need to use for cleanliness and hygiene practices.